This is an initiative we're doing to showcase the evolving role of in-house legal function and in-house legal professionals. So we're speaking to people like yourself, working within the legal industry, just to get a sense as to your background, some of the trends that you've seen, and where you think the industry is going. It'd be great if you could just tell us a little bit about your career journey so far and what led you to your current role.
Yeah, no, excellent. So thanks for having me here. For everyone, yeah, my name's René Jovel, but thanks for having me. So, I always joke that I like giving an elevator speech about myself, and I try not to make it, or sorry, a lift, right? I think y'all call them lifts, right?
Yeah, we do.
So
Yeah.
so try to do a shorter elevator or lift. I teach, and I always tell my students that you don't need a hero or villain origin story to get into the law. That's just kind of how it happened for me. So, and it's kind of timely. So both of my parents are from El Salvador. It's a small country in
Hmm.
Central America. They came up here in the early 80s to escape the civil war that was going down there, right, to try to find something better here
Hmm.
in America. And when they were here, they both had trouble going through the right process, right? And they were scammed, they got false legal advice, and thankfully there was amnesty in the middle of the 80s that allowed them to get their permanent residency. But a lot of the stuff that I was hearing growing up was, we couldn't find proper legal help. We had to rely on our own community to help us. There wasn't anyone that spoke Spanish. There wasn't anyone that looked like us, right? And that's kind
Hmm.
of all that I heard, right? So forever for me, I've always been on the, well, if I can do some sort of representation, right, to speak the language, but also to try and help, that's sort of what I've always been trying to go for. So, first generation Latino professional in my family, so not really a roadmap anywhere of how to do stuff. We didn't have much growing up, so the furthest east I'd ever been growing up was the border of Nevada and Arizona. So I went to
Yeah.
Chicago for Northwestern for undergrad, stuck around there, and then went to Marquette for law school. Spent 3 years after that working for U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, because again, I've always wanted to do the help
Hmm.
piece of it, and now I'm at Goodwill of Greater Milwaukee in Chicago. We're a social nonprofit enterprise that does a variety of things, but at the end of the day, we're trying to help people give a hand up to help them in whatever circumstances they are. And even though our Goodwill is different than the one that I was growing up, I mean, I was going there to buy clothes as well growing up, right? To try and do with the little that we had. So that's sort of the path that has
Yeah.
gotten me to where I am now.
Amazing. That's a great story. It's great that it's almost come full circle. Growing up, maybe looking around for someone that could help, and now, as you say, you're at Goodwill helping others. Talk to me a little bit. Legal's role as part of that. Obviously, legal is a very diverse
Hmm.
skill set and role. It's specific and it's precise at times, but it's very broad and commercial. How do you think that plays into the help that you provide at Goodwill?
Yeah, no, great question. One thing that I always tell folks is, and it's a tricky part because law school, at least in the US, or maybe I'm only speaking for the ones that I know, right? Marquette does a great job of trying to teach you about people, but a lot of the lessons or the learning you do are case books, case law, statutes, all of that, right?
Hmm.
And not necessarily the business side. And I think what takes a while and what I try to get across to the young lawyers that are on my team, and also, when I teach at the law school or even undergrads that are interested in law is, yes, you should be an expert in the law, but you have to know the business and you have to
Yeah.
know the business needs because everything is working so fast these days, right? That everyone sometimes thinks of legal as a department of no or a bottleneck, and that's the absolute last thing you got to be. I try to tell folks, we're a speed bump. We're here to slow you down a little bit to look at the risks, see what we need to do to get us to yes and get us to success. Um, to figure out what the risk appetite is, to figure out what potential delays that are going to be. But at the end of the day, we got to get our business to the point of success. And whether, for us, that's retail is the social economic engine of our enterprise,
Hmm.
but we also have our mission. We also have temp agency. We also serve meals and do uniforms and some administrative services at the naval station down in Great Lakes, Illinois. All of those have very different things, and we're all trying
Hmm.
to help one mission. But you got to know those businesses to be able to stay, fast and be able to adapt. And I think that's the legal side that
Yeah,
your brain figures out the risk, your brain figures out everything you got to do, but you got to tie it and translate it to folks that are not necessarily lawyers.
absolutely. I think that's the nail on the head there, isn't it? The having to adapt to the situation. You're spinning many plates, but you're trying to figure out what's best for the business, what's best for kind of social outcomes as well. I think it ties in nicely to, the reason we put together this campaign. The whole initiative has been around legal disruptors. How a legal team can help the business goals, how they can be creative and disruptive. What does that mean to you in terms of legal being disruptive, being creative? And can you think of any examples that's helped you with taking that mindset, whether it be at Goodwill or other organizations you've worked with?
Absolutely, yeah. It's interesting. It's again one of those things, right, that I talked about, right, to not be a bottleneck or a roadblock, right? Part of the
Mhm.
stuff that I feel like sometimes people will sometimes assume about the legal department is that we are constantly cautious, right? But there's curiosity that comes out of that. I think part of at least why I went to law was yes, I want to help and yes, my family's story, but I'm a constant learner. I want to know what's
Mhm.
going on. I want to be able to understand stuff. So for me, disruption is you have to figure stuff out and you have to figure out problems creatively before they escalate, right? So a problem, when sometimes I borrow stuff from my HR folks. It's an opportunity for learning, right? If there's an
Mhm.
error or an issue, it's an opportunity for learning and growth. So you got to find ways to figure that out. For us, right? I I originally started here as a staff attorney. I'm now deputy general counsel, but also director of legal operations.
Yeah.
Legal operations is something that one of the things that I was realizing when I was going to the ACC or hearing from other folks is legal ops, right? There's a ton of data and a ton of stuff that comes out of this that you need in order to be some sort of disruptor, right? That's kind of how we got to the CLM, right? The idea of using technology and using this data to help us grow and be efficient. Because at the end of the day, that's what the business is thinking about, right? They're
Mhm.
thinking about growth, they're thinking about retention, they may be thinking about sales, they may be thinking about marketing, getting the message out. So that's how we can be disruptive with them, right? So it's being curious, not just being cautious, uh, realizing that there's going to be risk. So figure out what that appetite for risk is going to be, figuring out the roadblock the roadblock is a no. How's the speed bump? Yes, with some conditions. Yes, with some caution, but also trying to end that what I would call reliance on outside counsel a bit. And a
Mhm.
little bit of that comes through legal ops, right? Figuring out the data, figuring out what you can bring in, figuring out what tools there are that are there at your disposal. So
Yeah.
disruptor, it's great. Let's figure it out. But let's figure it out and be smart about it instead of just going out and doing it. Although sometimes you do need that, but not always.
Yeah, sometimes you got to go for it straight in the
Yeah.
deep end.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
interesting though when you reflect on obviously your time, going to law school and then the different roles you've had to where you are now. Obviously, the technology landscape, I imagine, has changed quite significantly in those years. I'm not saying you're old, Renee. Don't worry. I'm not saying that at all. Um, if you were approaching, starting that path again now, and you're getting into law school, you're approaching the industry, you may be retraining from another kind of background. What would be some of the advice? What would be some of the reflections on how you can embrace technology, embrace AI, and then also some of the important considerations to make sure it's done properly?
Yeah, and no offense taken. I'm a proud elder millennial, right? I I remember
Not at
the
all.
days of getting CDs from America Online for 56K, and now, this it would take an hour to load anything. So, I think back to where I started, and I think back to where I am now, and I try to keep as agile as possible because tech is only going forward, right? It's
Hmm.
it's it's not slowing down. So when I think about my piece of advice for young lawyers, one of the things that I had the privilege and I was lucky to do it. I was elected. I don't know if y'all have it over there, but I was elected Student Bar Association president. It's like the student body president, right? My
Amazing. Yeah.
my 3L year. And the school, Marquette, sent us to the American Bar Association conference. Part of it was fantastic, but one of the reasons why I also like the ACC side, which is where we met,
Hmm.
is I had no reason to do it as a student, but I went to the Tech Expo, and that blew my mind as a
Mm.
student, right? Because in school, we were able to get Bloomberg, LexisNexis, and Westlaw, but it was just the legal research side of the house, nothing else. And I remember going into this convention center in San Francisco, and it was overwhelming, right? And I'm happy I did it then because now when I go to conferences, I have to check out what's out there, right? Because if I don't know what's happening, it's going to be way too late. It's similar to this AI, AI stuff that's happening now. We've been doing AI work for almost the last 2.5 years, so we are pretty further along the way than some of the other places that I know out there. And part of it is staying curious and going to these things and trying to figure that out. So speaking up, asking questions early, leading with curiosity of what's out there because, you know, tomorrow I may be giving a contract to someone on an iPad, right? Not printing it out, right?
Yeah.
And not trying to give them a book of something. So it's staying on top of this stuff, I think is highly, highly important.
Final question for me, Rennie. I think looking forwards, when you think about the industry you're in and the next 5 or even 10 years, if you had to start to identify some of the potential changes in either mindset as a legal professional, or even skill sets, what do you think will be most valuable for people to be starting to think about now in those future coming years?
Adaptability, data literacy,
Hmm.
and that communication and collaboration has to stay, right? So adaptability, you know, 3 years ago when this AI thing, or even earlier than that, right? When this AI thing was happening, a lot of the conversations that I was hearing was, well, how do we shut this down? Or how do we prevent it from entering our work, right? And I was here with, I don't think that's the right way of going, right? We got to think
Hmm.
about how we're going to use it and go forward, right? Because this thing is just going to happen. Now we at Goodwill, we now do a lot of Teams work and video conferencing. That wasn't heard of when I got here, right?
Mm.
We were in person all the time. We had to drive to our meetings and everything, and that's great, right? But it was COVID that forced us to think about
Hmm.
how to become a virtual workforce for some of these individuals, right? So adaptability is going to be key. Data literacy. I mean, the legal ops side of the house is, there's always this talk about, is the legal department at a company, are you a cost center? Sure, you're a cost center, right? Because that's the only data that traditionally you'll see, right? Bills, bills.
Hmm.
But what you gotta see is the savings that you bring, right? Whether it's you're reviewing contracts at an incredible speed, you're not losing out on deals because of that, or you're not being stuck in these auto renewal evergreens because you missed a date, right? Same thing with how many of these cases are you now able to do in house? How many EEOC or OSHA or NLRB claims are you able to do in house? And then what does that translate to outside counsel spending, right? And putting that data together. And Leah
Hmm.
Rosenau, who's been doing an awesome job for us on the legal ops side, is taking all that data and putting it out, right? So it's all data literacy of, are you a cost center? Sure, but here are the cost savings. And here's really the driving force that we're doing with that for the rest of the organization. Whether it's sales, marketing, whatever you're in, right? Because you got to use that stuff.
Hmm.
But also, how do you use that for your customers, your outside customers too, right? Let's use that data as well. And then that communication and collaboration. Look, people, human interaction, that's not going anywhere. And I think you have to figure out a way to be a part of that, right?
Our founder and CEO, Tom Dunlop, he talks about, he was obviously a former general counsel at a few software companies, and he talks about the importance of having a personal brand. So as an in-house lawyer and attorney, you're doing so much for so many people. Having a personal brand where you want to be dependable, you want to be intelligent, you want to be risk savvy, but also you want to be someone that gets business done. There's your point earlier, you don't want to be a blocker, you want to be an enabler. It sounds like that's maybe something you've thought about yourself in terms of what is my personal brand as an individual, what is my personal brand as a department. Maybe talk to me a little bit about that idea of having a personal brand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The personal brand is something that I learned in my politics days, right? Prior to
Mm-hmm.
coming to Goodwill, I worked for Senator Tammy Baldwin. And, obviously at a much grander scale, right? But I would see when you would go to these meetings with folks, like they knew who she was. They knew
Mm-hmm.
what she stood for. They knew what type of help they could get. And I started building that right as a reflection of myself when I would go to these community meetings, right? And they would start seeing, oh, that's René Jovel. He's the guy that can get this person, if I hopefully released from detention abroad, right? Or he's the guy that can get this visa for this individual coming to this conference or to attend a funeral or something else, right? So I slowly started realizing that brand, and then realized that when I got here, both at Goodwill, but also externally, right? At Goodwill, I had to build the brand of we are not a roadblock. I came in here and immediately, you're legal. You're the Department of No. Y'all don't
Yeah.
even know me, right? You don't know me like that, right? So
Yeah.
when I had an office, I on my ledge, I had some bobbleheads, I had some Funkos, and I had this blackboard where I would have the "Help me, help you" quote,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's all I'm about. Help me, help you, and people would see that when they would come in, and they would feel a little bit more at ease. I try to do the same thing when I'm out at conferences or whatever it may be, right? Right now I have my Rey Mysterio tie. I
Mm-hmm.
wear
Yeah.
I wear suits that sometimes are the non-traditional colors. I have, my collection of bright Nikes. If you go to the ACC on Sundays, you'll see me with a bright sparkly jacket. Um, I use ribbons as a way to express myself as well. If you go to it sounds like I'm plugging it, but
Please do go for it.
if you go to renejovel.com, you'll see
Yeah.
that like years ago I entered it, and I entered that website and it went to some weird website, and I was like, whenever this comes up, I'm gonna buy it because I
Yeah.
need to have it, right? So renejovel.com, and you'll see some of my like how I dress at some of this stuff, and you'll see like all the ribbons that I wear because it's all about personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
If someone sees you and they're immediately at ease or curious, then you gotta weigh in to a
Yeah.
conversation.
No, it's a great point. I think authenticity as well is
Yeah,
something which people really appreciate. Um, you know, people have serious professions, but then you need to be yourself as part of it and
absolutely.
express yourself, have fun with it, which is, what I always love about speaking to yourself. You enjoy what you do, and I think that
Yeah.
really resonates. You've already dropped a tag, but final question I've got here. Where can people follow your work or learn more about your journey? Your LinkedIn is amazing, so please
Oh,
give your
thank you.
LinkedIn a shout.
Yeah, absolutely. So go to my LinkedIn. I believe if you do linkedin.com/in/René Jovel, ReneJovel, no accent because the LinkedIn thing doesn't like it. Or renejovel.com, same thing. Yeah.
No, amazing. We'll link your website. We'll link your LinkedIn profile as well. But Renee, that's been amazing. Thank you so much for that. It's been great speaking to you. I think you shared some really interesting and unique perspectives there. So thank you very much for your time. That's been amazing.
Awesome. No, thank you. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.